The smell of stale whiskey and disinfectant still clings to the memory of that day. My father, Robert, died suddenly, quietly, in his sleep. And just 3 hours after the funeral, my older brother, Mark, delivered the news. He was the sole heir. The house, the entire family investment portfolio, the legacy, all of it. He sat in our father's mahogany study behind the desk, looking smug and solemn all at once. My older sister, Lila, sat beside me. Lila has Down syndrome, and her gentle, childlike dependence was, until that moment, simply a fact of our lives. Lila is a dependent, Mark explained. Not to her, but to me. She needs continuous care, and that requires complex financial management. I've taken the responsibility. His voice dripped with false martyrdom. He was using our sister's disability as a shield to justify his total takeover. But what Mark didn't know was that my father, a former insurance executive, had left one crucial asset that Mark hadn't found yet: a massive life insurance policy. A policy with a highly specific, legally binding loophole. A policy that would not only prove Mark's betrayal, but allow me to seize the entire family fortune and use it to protect the sister he was so casually exploiting. You think you know your family. You think greed stops at the funeral home door. This is the story of how I learned that the most important legal document is often the one hidden in plain sight, and how I used it to tear down my brother's cruel house of cards. Our family was wealthy, but our wealth was complicated. My father, Robert, made his fortune in the insurance industry. My mother passed away years ago, leaving 3 children: Mark, the ambitious oldest son, me, Alex, the middle child who became a lawyer, and Lila, our sweet, eternally innocent sister. I specialized in corporate law. Mark specialized in being Dad's favorite. He never had to work hard. He was just Mark. After Mom died, my father became completely dependent on Mark for companionship, even though I was the one who managed Dad's taxes and legal affairs. Lila was the anchor of our family. She lived in the family home with Dad, and I visited every weekend. She is nonverbal, but communicates through pure, radiant emotion. She loved our father deeply, and his death devastated her. When Dad died, Mark immediately seized control. He froze the bank accounts and took all of Dad's personal papers. He claimed he was protecting Lila. 2 weeks after the funeral, Mark called me and Lila into the study. He had brought his own lawyer, a smarmy man named Victor. Mark announced, "The will names me the sole executor and primary beneficiary. I will manage the estate and, of course, Lila's care." Victor added, "Lila's assets will be placed into a custodial account, managed by Mark under the highest fiduciary standards. Your share, Alex, is this house. You get the real estate, Mark gets the liquid assets." It was a blatant power play. The house was a massive tax liability with no cash. The liquid assets, the stocks, the bonds, the investments, were worth over $15 million. Mark had ensured I was stuck with the dead weight while he got the golden eggs, all under the guise of caring for Lila. I said nothing. I looked at Lila. She was clutching a worn, leather-bound book, one of Dad's old insurance manuals. It was the only thing she had taken from his desk. I thought nothing of it then. I was already planning my lawsuit. My immediate priority was Lila. Mark moved her out of the family home almost immediately, claiming the house needed to be prepared for sale. He placed her in a substandard residential care facility far across town. I visited Lila, and she was clearly miserable. The staff was indifferent, and she was isolated. When I confronted Mark, he was dismissive. "It's temporary, Alex. I'm busy managing the estate. The facility is fine. It's expensive." "Expensive?" I challenged him. "Mark, you have control of $15 million. You can afford the best care in the state." He leaned in close, his face hard. "I'm investing the assets, Alex, not wasting them on five-star care. Lila doesn't know the difference anyway." That line, "Lila doesn't know the difference," was the moment I moved past anger and into total legal warfare. I would not let him use her disability as an excuse for his greed. I knew a standard will challenge would drag on for years and bleed my own resources dry. I needed an angle. I needed something outside the estate's jurisdiction. B, the discovery of the manual. I went back to the old study, now empty and echoing. I was looking for anything Mark might have missed. A deed, a bank statement, anything. I found nothing. But then I remembered Lila and the book, the old leather-bound insurance manual. I called the care facility and asked the attendant to send it to me. It was titled Life Insurance and Annuity Law, Standard Policies and Codicils. It was Dad's old reference book from 30 years ago. I flipped through it, finding nothing but dry, underlined passages. Then, tucked into the very back cover, where the binding was frayed, I found a single, tri-folded piece of paper. It wasn't a will or a deed, it was a life insurance policy declaration for Robert Thorne. The kind of policy my father, the expert, would have used to hedge his bets. The policy was for $5 million. Mark had completely missed it because it was an out-of-state private annuity that paid out upon death, bypassing probate altogether. But the most critical part wasn't the number, it was the beneficiary clause. It read, primary beneficiary, Mark Thorne, secondary beneficiary, Alex Thorne, tertiary beneficiary, any dependent child of Robert Thorne who is legally disabled and in the full-time care of a third party up to the date of payout. I read it 3 times. The blood rushed out of my head. The policy had been drafted years ago, likely before Mom died. My father hadn't known Mark would place Lila in a facility, but he had structured the policy to ensure that if Lila was ever left in the care of a third party, meaning not him or Mark, the payout would be diverted to protect her she was so casually exploiting. But there was a deeper problem. The policy paid out to the tertiary beneficiary only if both the primary and secondary beneficiaries were legally disqualified. Mark was the primary beneficiary. I was the secondary. I couldn't just sue him. I had to disqualify both of us. I called Mr. Jenkins, the old real estate lawyer I had used before. I knew he was the only one I could trust to move fast and quietly. I explained the loophole. I had to intentionally and legally disqualify myself as the secondary beneficiary, and then I had to prove that Mark was disqualified as the primary beneficiary. How do I disqualify Mark? I asked. Mr. Jenkins didn't hesitate. In almost all states, a beneficiary can be legally disqualified if they commit a clear breach of fiduciary duty or financial abuse against a fellow heir who is also a dependent. He moved Lila into an inferior, less expensive facility while controlling a multi-million-dollar trust designed for her benefit. That's a clear breach of his fiduciary duty as her executor, Alex. It's financial abuse. The emergency hearing was set for a Friday afternoon. Mark and his lawyer, Victor, were confident. They thought I was fighting over a trivial care facility. They had no idea I was coming after his entire life's ambition. I didn't bring up the $5 million policy. I focused only on Lila's well-being and Mark's duties as his fiduciary. I presented photos of the dreary facility, cross-referenced with the exorbitant fees he was charging the estate. Victor argued, "Mark is a busy man. He is managing the entire estate. He needs time to liquidate assets before moving Lila." I stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Thorne is prioritizing investment returns over the health and comfort of his sister, a legally disabled adult. He has access to $15 million. His choice to move Lila to a substandard facility is a clear and documented breach of his fiduciary trust designed to free up capital for his personal gain. The judge, clearly moved by the evidence and the photos of Lila, ruled swiftly. The court finds a clear and severe breach of fiduciary duty. Mark Thorne is immediately removed as Lila Thorne's executor and financial custodian. The assets of the estate pertaining to Lila's care are now placed under the temporary management of a court-appointed third party. Mark was furious, but he thought he had only lost control of a portion of the estate. I left the courthouse and didn't celebrate. I went straight to the insurance company's regional office. I submitted the following documents: my notarized waiver disqualifying me as secondary beneficiary, the court order officially finding Mark guilty of financial abuse, disqualifying him as primary beneficiary, the original policy listing the tertiary beneficiary, quote, any dependent child of Robert Thorne who is legally disabled and in the full-time care of a third party, unquote. 2 days later, the insurance company's CEO called me personally. Miss Thorne, he said, sounding stunned, your father was a genius. He created an airtight mechanism. Mark is disqualified. You are waived. The payout must go to the tertiary beneficiary. The full $5 million will be transferred into the newly established court-mandated trust for Lila's perpetual care. The money didn't go to me, but it went exactly where it was supposed to go, to protect the person Mark was exploiting. The real climax came when I walked into the family headquarters and confronted Mark. He still thought the $15 million estate was his. Alex, this is pointless. You got $5 million for Lila, which is great, but the estate is mine. We need to focus on liquidating the stocks. I placed the court order on his desk, the order removing him as executor. Then I placed the letter from the insurance company on top of it. Mark, I said, my voice steady, that court order proving your financial abuse doesn't just apply to Lila's $5 million policy. It applies to your entire role as executor of my father's estate. In New York, a beneficiary proven to have committed financial abuse against a fellow heir forfeits their executor status and their right to any liquid assets. His face went pale. What? No, that's not in the will. It's in the law, Mark, I clarified. You are not only removed as executor, but the court will now review your entire benefit from the $15 million estate. Your breach of fiduciary duty makes you ineligible to handle any of my father's money. You are out. Everything you have controlled for the past month, the houses, the stocks, the investments, is now being audited by the court-appointed trustee. He had gambled his entire inheritance on a lie, and he lost everything. The following months were painful, but ultimately cleansing. Mark was devastated, but ultimately left with only a small cash allowance and no control. He finally had to learn what it was like to earn a living. Lila, however, thrived. The $5 million endowment combined with the $15 million estate, now managed by an ethical third-party trustee, means she will receive the best, most compassionate care for the rest of her life. She is now in a beautiful, specialized home near me. I visit her daily. She doesn't need to speak to tell me she's happy. She laughs, she paints, and she shows me the worn leather insurance manual she still keeps. I was appointed to oversee the new trust board, giving me complete transparency and control over Lila's well-being. My father, in his final brilliance, had ensured that his most vulnerable child would be the most protected. He didn't trust Mark, and he didn't trust the simple legal system. He trusted the cold, hard logic of the insurance contract. The lesson I learned is that when you have nothing left to lose, you have the greatest clarity. I didn't fight for my own money. I fought for my sister's safety. And in doing so, I didn't just win a fortune, I exposed the true moral decay in my family. Greed makes people sloppy. My brother got greedy, and he overlooked the one document that held the key to his destruction. Always remember, the laws created to protect the vulnerable are often the most powerful weapons against the predatory. I fought the battle not for the money,
but for the principal. And in the end, I realized the $15 million fortune was simply the reward for doing the right thing. The best defense against a bad family is a good lawyer, and a father who understands the loopholes. But Mark's humiliation had a cost. He was too proud to simply walk away. A few weeks after the trust was established, I found a series of mysterious, high-value unauthorized transactions in the estate's stock portfolio. Transactions that could only have been executed using the secure keys my father had hidden. And Mark had the only other key. I knew he was planning his revenge.